Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Sahara Omar. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing here in the state of Texas. And today's video is a video that I wanted to share with you guys on decision-making process. When I work with clients in therapy, I see an ongoing struggle of not knowing either that when we are making decisions, there's actual steps to the process itself, and or majority of people skip over some of these steps. And typically when we do that, and either when we're not aware or when we skip over some of these steps, we end up having a lot of regrets down the line as well too. So the challenge is to learn these steps slowly. It does take time, and then over time you become really fast at it. But the challenge is to either slow down a little bit and also do not skip over the process, okay? All right, so first, I wanted to share with you guys, give credit to the person who developed this concept, and also go through the process itself with you guys. And then at the end of the video, I'll give you few personal examples, like real life examples, so that way you can see how this is applicable to personal and real life examples as well, okay? All right, so the initial developer, his name is Herbert A. Simon. He developed this concept back in 1950s. His background as far as education and career fields that he was working in, he's a psychologist and also political scientist. And he was just fascinated with like, how do people make decisions? And he came up with something called bounded rationale, which means when we are making decisions, we are stuck in either limited information that we have and a cognitive resources that are available to us, which means what the brain is capable of, essentially, right? Rather than a thorough and purely rational process, right? And I'm so thankful that he gave us these 7 steps, because it helps us stay rational, helps us stay grounded when we are going through the steps. If you're a parent yourself, I highly encourage you to teach these steps to your kids at a young age. It is valuable as they grow up and become adults and active members of society to slow down and make decisions that actually benefit them in the long term. There are other scholars that contributed to the work of like in group settings, for example, and also he was one of the pioneers of AI as well too. Like his work itself is applicable to AI and machine learning. So he did an awesome job there. All right, so here are the 7 steps. Like I said, the challenge is to not skip over it, okay? So first step is to identify the decision. So what are the actual decisions that you need to make here, right? And it could be something simple as like what's for dinner tonight, all the way to what state you're gonna live in and what country you wanna move to, what job you wanna have, right? Just the brain, typically what I see is we have to say it out loud. If we don't say it out loud and it just sits in our brain, it creates these secondary loops and we're spiraling with things that we don't need to spiral with, right? So sometimes it's okay to voice things out loud, and also it's okay to write things down as well too, so that way your brain can see itself outside of itself as well. And then you can go to the second step, which is collect information. This part is all about research. We have technology now, so it's pretty awesome. Like information-wise, we have opportunities to look up information on our own. Back in the day, there was something called encyclopedia, where people had to go in person to look for information, right? So not being afraid to read books and look up information and take your time as you're looking up information as well, okay? Then step 3 is, are there any alternatives? Do you see any other option outside of the options that you're thinking of? Alternatives usually is where I see a lot of people get stuck in as well. This is where sometimes we do need to speak to other people, whether it is your therapist, your family members, friends, community leaders, anybody outside of you. Just running it by people can sometimes give you another perspective. And it can open the options that your brain is thinking of as well too, which is pretty cool. And then you can weigh the evidence. This is where step 4 is what I recommend, creating like a pros and cons list. So that way, and typically when we're creating a pros and cons list, I highly recommend like write things down as well, because trying to create a pros and cons list in your brain, it can either overload you and you become overwhelmed by the options that are available and you spiral, or you might shut down altogether and not be interested in any further evidence, kind of like weighing out the evidence that you have. Okay, so just create a pros and cons list, for example. That's a good way to weigh out the evidence. I'm pretty sure there's other options out there as far as like how do you weigh the evidence, but the typical one that I really like is just creating a pros and cons list. And then you can go to step 5, where you're choosing the best option based on the evidence weighing list that you created for yourself. And then you can go to step 6. Step 6 is that's when you take the option, right? So you choose and then you act on it, right? The taking action is another step that I see a lot of people find themselves paralyzed in, where they kind of bounce between all of these other steps, but then they never actually move towards making that decision. And a lot of times we can fantasize about things, but we do have to learn how to move and make decisions and try things out, even if it doesn't pan out the way we expected it to pan out. I encourage you to just have the courage to actually take the action, so that way you can learn from the experience itself. And then step 7 is review your decision. Okay, we do want to learn how to look back and kind of see, hey, did I make a good decision there? What would I change differently here, right? The review decision here, the last step, typically helps you kind of reflect a little bit more and slow down and process, so that way you don't make the same decision in the future if it's not beneficial for you. Okay, so those are all the 7 steps. The more you practice each step from 1 all the way to 7, the easier it gets. What I also see, so let me give you guys a couple of examples first, and then I'll kind of dissect a little bit more as well as I go along. But the common one that I see is, like I said, skipping over the process. But let me come back. Sorry. Let me just give you the example itself. So let's say something simple is like, what's for dinner, right? Your brain might say, okay, what's for dinner is the decision itself, right? Like you're identifying the decision. I have to eat something, right, for dinner. Then you have to collect information. What options do I have, right? So do I have to make a meal at home, or do I have to go order a meal, or do I go to the grocery store and pick up some items and then cook at home, right? So those are the 3 options that we have, for example. And then collect the information, right? So if I'm gonna look for food at home, I have to get up, look at the fridge. What options do I have? Did I meal prep before? If I didn't meal prep, okay, I don't have something, but I have to make something from scratch. Then if it's ordering meal, for example, what are the options around? What am I in the mood for? Am I also watching what I'm eating? How much does it cost is another thing to consider, for example, right? And if it's the option 3, for example, let me go to the grocery store because I don't have anything at home and I don't want to just order. I'm going to make something from scratch. You have to factor in the time that you get ready and go to the grocery store and how much it will cost as well too, okay? Then identify any alternatives, right? So an alternative for dinner, for example, is calling mom or calling a friend to see if they are open for dinner, for example, right? Or if somebody else is, like, let's say if you have a partner, asking them like, hey, are you planning to make a meal for us, or are we eating at home, or what are your thoughts, right? That will already bring you another alternative option there. Then you have to weigh out the evidence, right? So think through like cost, time, and also the preference of the meal itself as well too, right? Whether it's healthy or not, like what options do you have there? And then choose the best option, like what is the one that sounds the best for you based on the evidence that you're witnessing, and then take the action, right? So go ahead and act on it. Whether if you make up the decision there with going to the grocery store, actually get dressed, go to the grocery store, pick up the items, come back home and actually make the meal itself. And then after you eat your meal, take a moment and reflect, was that a good decision? What do I need to change next time, right? Sometimes you have to meal prep ahead of time, so that way we're not faced with this decision every day, right? If you're not a fan of meal prep, I met a lot of people that do not like leftovers, for example. Going grocery shopping, for example, once a week, so that way you can have fresh produce and you can make things from scratch. And I've met also people that love to cook as well too, as a hobby, as a way to explore life and learning a new skill in itself as well. So if you guys noticing, there is no right or wrong. It's just learning to go through the steps so that way you know the decision that you're making is best fit for you and the lifestyle that you have for yourself as well, okay? I'll give you guys another example too. The common one that I see is when it comes down to decision making, whether we should move to another state or stay in the same state, for example. For that one, and then there's another example of like whether you should leave a relationship that you're in versus stay in the relationship that you're in. Those are the three things that I see, okay? Like what to do for basic life skills all the way to like these difficult decisions, okay? With the state, for example, you have to identify again, I need to move out of the state, collect information. What states are you thinking of? And also, as you're collecting information, think of like, for example, the cost again and the climate, like the weather, also safety, right? Thinking about what part of life are you in? Are you early 20s? It's completely different than early 30s. 30s, we're thinking about settling down and having kids, right? Early 20s, we're still a little bit more exploring and we're not tied down to responsibilities. Alternatives, right? Like asking, for example, your parents' feedback on what do they think, or your therapist, and asking them like, hey, is there something here that I'm not witnessing, right? Like, or am I missing a piece here? And that's the alternative piece where somebody else is giving you that feedback. Weigh out the evidence, make sure that you're creating that pros and cons list again so you can see, make the best choice that fits you based on that evidence again, and then take the action. Move if you decide to move, or stay if you decide to stay, and then look back once that decision is made. Was that a good decision? Would you make any changes there? And you can go from there, okay? Like I said, majority of people skip over some of these steps, so the challenge is to not skip over it. The more you practice, the easier it gets. There are certain things that you have to slow down and collect more information. And other things, if it's simple decision, it doesn't take as much time as well there too. But nevertheless, these are the 7 steps that, in general, that we want to challenge ourselves to take on. Okay. All right. I hope you guys liked the video. Feel free to hit that thumbs up. Also, feel free to leave me a comment. Let me know what part of the decision-making process you struggle with. It does take time, so just be kind to yourself. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.